Alright, now this is really a hard video for me to make, but sadly I have to say, I'm taking a break from Tower of Fantasy. Now I'm sure you've already seen a few other content creators step down from the game due to lost interest in the new game, Weathering Waves. But I wanted to make sure that I at least discuss my reasonings for taking a break from the game. Now I don't plan to quit Tower of Fantasy completely, I still plan to play it, I'm just not going to be making any content on it anytime soon. So my first reason is lack of interest. Even when we get new areas with big patches, it still roughly goes the same way. We have a new area, we're able to explore it for a little bit, we have a new energy system, and we're just trying to get that energy so that way we can get the statue upgrades. And the main reason why you're doing this is so that way you can get rows for the characters and future characters in the game. Bringing us to events, which is one of the main ways how you get rewards in this game. But these events can either be a hit or a miss. To where some events can be really fun to hang out with your friends and to quickly grind and get your rewards. To where other events can be quite time consuming and you're desperately trying to gather your friends so that way you can quickly get through it. Bringing us to the money problem. But I want to go ahead and state, at least when it comes to this section, that this is really only for high spenders. If you're not really putting that much money in the game, it actually is a much more enjoyable experience due to the fact that the power system scales exponentially based off the characters. So if you're only focused on one element and you're saving, especially if you're a light spender, most of the time you're able to max out the newest character of your element. So when it comes to Tower of Fantasy, generally the power system is like this: character, matricy, gear, then Titan gear. To where the main way how you're going to get the biggest power boost for your element is to get the newest limited character for that element. And depending on how much money you put in the game, you're usually going to need more copies of the character to outscale your previous teams. On top of that, sometimes the character's kit doesn't fully work unless you have those stars. For your best case, usually you just need 1 star. Your worst case, sometimes you need to get all the way up to 5 star. Next, we have the matrices, to where most of the time just getting a 0-star 4-piece will be a very big power increase for your team. But if you have other limited matrices, especially if they're high star, most of the time you can just use those instead of going for the new matrices. And the weird thing about Tower of Fantasy is the lower you go down in priority, the more money you're going to spend. To where generally if you're maxing out matrices, it's going to cost more than maxing out the character. Which brings us to the gearing system, to where you have 3 categories. First, you have your regular gear, to where the main way how you get these is through joint operations, as well as a few other ways. Then we have Vera gear, which is much harder to get than regular gear. For free-to-play options, generally you get these from challenges or events. But if you do put money in the game, you can buy weekly packs to get Vera gear. But a lot of times this does not work out since the stats are random. So potentially you could be buying these weekly packs for a year and still not have the greatest Vera gear. To where again, this is lower priority than the character itself, so if you are going to spend, just save that money for the character. Which brings us to Titan gear. Now this is one of the main ways I can increase your stats for the main element. The problem is the resources needed to change your gear into Titan gear are very slim. One of the main ways how you get these is through events and the commissary. Since these resources are so slim and new Titan gear gets available every other patch, a lot of the times it's better just to buy the Titan monthly, so that way you can at least get all your new gear augmented. But this is where it can get really expensive in the game, especially if you're trying to hunt down certain augments. Let's say that you have weak point 2 and you want to get weak point 3. Sometimes, depending on your luck, you could end up spending so much money that you could have bought a whole new character just to get that weak point 2 to weak point 3, because again, like most gear in this game, the Titan augments that you get are random. So at best, I would try to be a light spender, and if that's going to cause you not to be able to get the newest characters, it's best just to avoid this. Now, gear can be the most expensive thing in the game if you let it get that far, to where I believe this is one of the worst parts of the game, because most of the time you want to focus on getting the characters and their matrices. Now, I do believe Tower of Fantasy is aware of this, to where they even put out packs to help with this randomness. The problem is that they're way too expensive and you still have a chance not to get what you want. So even if you're a well in this game, you should never buy these packs. And lastly, I am playing Weathering Waves and I am going to put out content discussing that. But even with all that, I still think Tower of Fantasy is a fun game, especially if you want to just have a fun time with your friends. But Tower of Fantasy did mention that they plan to make a balanced server to where the characters are going to be reworked and there will not be a gearing system, to where hopefully you're able to bring in the characters that you previously bought for a brand new Tower of Fantasy experience. But with that, that should be all the reasons why I'm stepping down from Tower of Fantasy for the time being. So hopefully I'll see you in Weathering Waves, and I'll talk with you guys later.